In the next 24 hours, developing nations will pay $232 million in debt interest to wealthy creditor countries and international banks, money that could build 1,160 schools, fund 46,400 doctors, or provide clean water to 4.6 million people. Yet not $1 of principal gets repaid. This isn't charity in reverse. It's a machine. A perfectly designed system that ensures poor countries stay poor while extracting wealth upward, forever. They tell you it's about fiscal responsibility and creditworthiness. The truth? It's the modern equivalent of feudalism, where instead of owning the land, creditors own the government's budget, its policy decisions, and its future. Most people believe international debt works like personal debt. You borrow, you repay, you're free. But sovereign debt operates by entirely different rules, rules written by the lenders themselves. When you can't pay, they don't repossess your house. They repossess your country. They dictate which hospitals get built, which industries get subsidized, which crops get planted. The illusion that nations are truly independent when foreign creditors control their fiscal policy is perhaps the most successful deception of the modern economic order. Why don't they teach this in economics classes? Because the system depends on the appearance of legitimacy, on the myth that debt is neutral, technical, apolitical. By the end of this video, you'll understand the exact mechanism by which debt becomes a permanent trap. See the historical pattern that's ensnared dozens of nations across 2 centuries, and discover why your own country's debt trajectory might be following the exact same path. You're about to learn what the World Bank doesn't want in textbooks. Step into the ornate Ministry of Finance building in Cairo, August 1876. The afternoon heat is suffocating despite the high ceilings and slowly rotating punkah fans pulled by servants standing in corners. Khedive Ismail Pasha, ruler of Egypt, sits at an enormous desk of imported French walnut, its surface covered with ledgers bound in red leather. He's 46, wearing a fez and European-style military uniform with gold epaulettes, his face glistening with sweat that has nothing to do with the heat. In his hands he holds a document from the Anglo-French Debt Commission. Men who aren't Egyptian, don't speak Arabic, but now control his nation's finances. Through the tall windows, he can see the Nile, its waters the lifeblood of Egypt's cotton economy, an economy that now belongs to European creditors. The numbers are staggering. Egypt borrowed $7 million from British and French banks in 1862 to modernize, building railways, digging the Suez Canal, creating telegraph lines. The loans carried interest rates of 12–15% compound. By 1876, 14 years later, Egypt has paid $40 million in interest and principal, but still owes $91 million, 13 times the original loan. How? The banks refinanced the debt repeatedly, each time adding fees, commissions, and restructuring costs that exceeded the original principal. The mathematics of compound interest at usurious rates made repayment mathematically impossible. Ismail knows this now. He knows that 60% of Egypt's entire government revenue goes to debt service. Every week, the Debt Commission's representatives arrive to claim their payment before teachers, soldiers, or administrators get paid. He knows he's no longer governing Egypt. He's managing a revenue extraction operation for European banks. The mechanism that trapped Egypt was elegant in its cruelty. Lend to ambitious developing nations at rates that guarantee default, then use default as justification to seize control of government finances to ensure repayment. The cognitive bias? Optimism bias. Ismail believed cotton prices would stay high forever, that Egypt's economy would grow fast enough to service the debt. Instead, global cotton prices collapsed in 1876, cutting Egypt's revenue by 40% while debt obligations remained fixed in gold-backed pounds. The trap snapped shut. Within 3 years, Britain and France would force Ismail to abdicate, install a puppet government, and place European advisors in every ministry. By 1882, Britain would occupy Egypt militarily, officially to protect investments. The occupation lasted 70 years, but Egypt wasn't unique. It was the prototype. The Ottoman Empire faced identical debt traps. By 1881, 50% of Ottoman government revenue went to European creditors, forcing the creation of the Ottoman Public Debt Administration run entirely by European bankers. Latin American nations Argentina, Mexico, Venezuela borrowed heavily from British banks in the 1820s, 1870s under similar terms, defaulted when commodity prices fell, and faced gunboat diplomacy when they couldn't pay. In 1902, British, German, and Italian warships blockaded Venezuela's ports to force debt repayment, direct military intervention to collect debts. China's Qing dynasty borrowed from Western powers to modernize and suppress internal rebellions, then watched helplessly as customs revenues, salt monopolies, and entire government agencies were placed under foreign control when debts couldn't be serviced. The pattern was universal: lend, trap, extract, control. Take Ahmed Hassan, a cotton farmer outside Alexandria, Egypt, in 1879. His family had worked the same land for 6 generations, growing cotton that fetched premium prices in Lancashire's textile mills. In 1875, Ahmed earned 120 from his harvest, enough to feed his family, pay his workers, replace tools, and save for his daughter Fatima's dowry. By 1879, his costs had tripled while cotton prices halved due to global oversupply, and Egypt's credit collapse, making trade financing impossible. But his taxes, those doubled. The Debt Commission demanded its payment first, and with 60% of government revenue pledged to European creditors, Cairo solved its budget crisis by crushing Egyptian taxpayers. Ahmed paid $47 in taxes on an income of 61 Rs. He tried selling his tools, his spare donkey, even his wife's jewelry. When tax collectors arrived in October 1879, he had nothing left. They seized his land for tax arrears, land his family had owned for 200 years, and sold it at auction to a British agricultural company for 30% of its value. Ahmed didn't survive to see what happened next. On November 12, 1879, unable to face his family's destitution and his daughter's lost marriage prospects, he drank poison. His widow and 4 children joined the masses of rural poor flooding into Cairo, where they lived in slums and eventually perished. During the cholera epidemic of 1883, his story was repeated 100,000 times across Egypt as the debt commission's policies destroyed the peasant farmer class to ensure European creditors received their scheduled payments. The choice was explicit: pay foreign banks or feed Egyptians. The commission chose the banks. The mechanism of destruction was systemically designed. When Egypt defaulted in 1876, European creditors didn't forgive debt or negotiate reasonable terms. They imposed the Anglo-French dual control, literally seating British and French controllers in the Egyptian cabinet with veto power over all spending. These unelected foreigners cut education funding by 60%, halted infrastructure projects, slashed healthcare spending, and doubled taxes on farmers. Every decision optimized for debt repayment at the cost of Egyptian welfare. The result was predictable. Between 1876 and 1882, Egypt's tax revenue fell by 30% as economic activity collapsed, but debt obligations remained fixed. This created a doom loop. Falling revenues led to higher tax rates, which destroyed more economic activity, which reduced revenues further, requiring even higher taxes. The system was eating itself. The social explosion was inevitable. In 1881, Colonel Ahmed Urabi led a nationalist military revolt demanding Egypt for Egyptians and threatening to default on all foreign debts. The British response was immediate and brutal. In July 1882, the Royal Navy bombarded Alexandria, killing thousands of civilians. British troops invaded, defeated Urabi's forces at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir in September, and occupied Egypt. The official justification? Protecting the Suez Canal and ensuring financial stability. The actual reason? Ensuring British bondholders continued receiving interest payments. The occupation lasted until 1956, 74 years of colonial rule triggered by debt default. And who paid for the military occupation? Egypt did. Britain added the costs of the invasion and occupation to Egypt's debt ledger, forcing Egyptians to finance their own conquest. Then, Egypt paid 60% of government revenue to foreign creditors, 1876, 1882. Now, Zambia pays 45% of government revenue to external debt service, 2020-2024, forcing cuts to healthcare during a tuberculosis epidemic. The pattern hasn't changed, only the terminology. We don't call it colonial control anymore. We call it IMF conditionality and structural adjustment programs, and different words. Same mechanism, same outcome. When COVID-19 struck in March 2020, developing nations faced simultaneous health crisis, economic collapse, and debt crisis. Argentina defaulted on $65 billion in foreign debt in May 2020, its ninth default since independence. Lebanon's currency lost 90% of its value between 2019-2021, as debt reached 170% of GDP, triggering bank runs, food shortages, and political collapse. Sri Lanka defaulted on its $51 billion external debt in April 2022. Becoming the first Asian nation to default in 21 years, inflation hit 70%, fuel vanished, and protesters stormed the presidential palace, forcing the president to flee the country. In each case, the IMF response was identical to the 1876 Anglo-French Debt Commission. Demand spending cuts, insist on debt repayment, threaten exclusion from global financial markets if governments prioritize citizens over creditors. The modern version operates through the Washington Consensus, policies imposed by the IMF and World Bank as conditions for loans or debt restructuring. Zambia, facing copper price collapse and debt crisis in 2020, received IMF assistance in 2022 worth $1.3 billion. The conditions? Cut public sector wages by 20%, eliminate fuel subsidies, causing prices to triple, privatize government assets, reduce social spending. The justification? Fiscal sustainability and debt repayment capacity. The result? Teachers, nurses, and government workers unable to afford food, hospitals without medicine, schools closing. But foreign creditors, primarily Chinese state banks and Western bondholders, continue receiving scheduled payments. The IMF doesn't ask, should human beings starve so bondholders in New York and Beijing get their interest? The answer is assumed, yes, look at your own country's debt trajectory. The United States federal debt stands at $34 trillion 2024, requiring $659 billion annually just in interest payments, more than defense spending. This debt grows faster than GDP, meaning debt to GDP ratio continuously rises, following the exact mathematical pattern that trapped Egypt, Argentina, and every other nation that entered the debt doom loop. European nations, Italy 140% debt to GDP, Greece 171%, Japan 264%, have debt levels that would have triggered IMF intervention if they were developing nations. But they're not subject to structural adjustment because they're core economies. The rules apply differently. Still, the mathematics don't care about geopolitics. Compound interest eventually consumes everything. Why do voters in wealthy nations ignore this? The same normalcy bias that trapped Khedive Ismail. We're not Egypt. We're not Argentina. We're a developed economy. Our debt is in our own currency. We can print money. These are the same rationalizations Egyptians made in 1870. We control the Suez Canal. We're strategically indispensable. Ottomans made in 1875, "We're the Caliphate, our empire is eternal," and every other empire made, before discovering that debt mathematics override political power. Your government debt isn't your grandfather's mortgage. It's a trap that transfers sovereignty from elected officials to bondholders who face no voters, answer to no citizens, and optimize solely for debt repayment, regardless of human cost. So what actually protects your wealth when sovereign debt spirals guarantee economic crisis and currency collapse? What did the survivors of every debt crisis do differently? History provides a three-part protection formula for individuals living in debt-trapped nations. Eliminate personal debt and build counter-cyclical cash reserves, 40% of annual income. Become the opposite of your government, debt-free with liquid reserves in hard currency, positioned to acquire assets when the debt spiral triggers crisis and asset fire sales. Why this works? In every sovereign debt crisis, governments respond by debasing currency, printing money to service debt, or raising taxes dramatically to meet creditor demands. Both destroy the purchasing power of wages and savings, but they also trigger asset price collapses, as over-leveraged citizens and businesses are forced to sell real estate, businesses, and investments at fire sale prices. If you're debt-free with liquid reserves in stable currency, you're positioned to buy generational wealth during the crisis. During Argentina's 2001-2002 crisis, peso deposits lost 70% of value overnight when the government froze bank accounts and forcibly converted dollars to pesos at unfavorable rates. But those who held physical dollars outside the banking system could purchase Argentine real estate for 30 cents on the dollar. During Greece's 2010-2015 crisis, property prices fell 40%. Businesses sold for fractions of their value, and those with euro cash, especially held outside Greek banks, acquired assets that have since recovered. How to implement? First, aggressively eliminate all personal debt, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, even mortgage if possible. Every dollar of debt is a claim on your future income. When crisis hits, debt becomes a trap. Second, build liquid cash reserves equal to 40% of your annual gross income, but hold it strategically. 40% in your domestic currency for daily expenses and to take advantage of immediate local opportunities, 30% in Swiss francs or Singapore dollars, hard currencies unlikely to devalue with your domestic currency, 20% in physical gold and silver coins, sovereign-proof wealth, 10% in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, if you understand the technology and risk. Store the hard currency portion outside the banking system, home safe, private vault, or offshore bank account, if legal in your jurisdiction. Never hold 100% in domestic banks. Capital controls and bank bail-ins are standard responses to debt crises. See Cyprus 2013, Greece 2015, Lebanon 2019. Example, in Lebanon's 2019-2022 financial collapse, Nadia Khalil, a Beirut pharmacist, had maintained 50% of savings in physical US dollars hidden at home after watching Argentina's crisis years earlier, when Lebanese banks froze accounts and imposed withdrawal limits of $200 a month in November 2019. Her friends and colleagues were financially imprisoned, unable to access their life savings even as the Lebanese pound lost 90% of value. Nadia? She continued operating normally, purchased her competitor's pharmacy for $35,000, valued at $280,000 in 2018, bought a Beirut apartment from a desperate seller for $42,000, worth $180,000 pre-crisis, and positioned herself to emerge from the crisis wealthier while maintaining living standards throughout. Her paranoia about keeping cash outside banks made her one of Lebanon's crisis winners. Acquire jurisdiction independence, second residency or citizenship. Secure the legal right to live. Work and bank in at least one country other than your nation of birth. preferably one with low debt to GDP ratio and history of fiscal stability. Why this works? When sovereign debt crises escalate, governments impose capital controls, preventing money from leaving the country. Wealth taxes, forced currency conversions, and in extreme cases, asset confiscation. If you have only one citizenship, you're trapped in your government's debt crisis with no legal escape. Multiple jurisdictions provide options. If one government implements capital controls, you can legally move yourself and assets to another jurisdiction. During Argentina's Corralito, 2001-2002, citizens with only Argentine citizenship were legally prohibited from moving money abroad and faced frozen bank accounts. Those with dual citizenship, Italian, Spanish, German heritage being common in Argentina, could legally establish bank accounts in Europe and transfer assets before controls tightened. During China's capital control tightening, 2016-2017, citizens with Canadian or Australian second citizenship legally moved assets to those jurisdictions, while single citizenship Chinese faced $50,000 annual transfer limits. How to implement? Research citizenship by descent programs first. Many European countries, Ireland, Italy, Poland, Germany, grant citizenship if you can prove ancestry, often going back to great-grandparents. This is the cheapest path, $2,000, $5,000 in legal fees. Second option, residency by investment programs in stable countries. Portugal's Golden Visa, $280,000 investment. Residency in 2 years, citizenship in 5 years. Panama's Friendly Nations Visa, minimal investment for citizens of 50 favored nations, or Caribbean citizenship by investment. St. Lucia, Dominica, $100,000, $150,000 instant second passport. Third option, professional retirement visas. Many countries offer residency for remote workers. Spain's digital nomad visa, Portugal's D7 visa for retirees, Estonia's e-residency for digital entrepreneurs. Once you have legal residency, establish a bank account in that jurisdiction and maintain it actively. Monthly deposits, even small amounts, to show economic ties. The goal isn't to abandon your home country. It's to have a legal exit if debt crisis triggers controls or confiscation. Example: during Greece's 2010-2015 crisis, Dimitrios Papas, an Athens architect with German citizenship through his mother, watched Greek banks impose capital controls in June 2015, limiting ATM withdrawals to $60 per day, closing banks for 2 weeks, and forcibly converting large deposits to government bonds. Dimitrios had already moved 70% of his savings to a German bank account in Munich in 2012, when he saw the debt crisis accelerating. When controls hit, his Greek-only friends were trapped, unable to pay employees, purchase materials, or operate businesses. Dimitrios continued operating normally by paying suppliers from his German account, maintained his business through the crisis, and bought 3 distressed properties from desperate sellers for 40% of pre-crisis value. His second citizenship wasn't luxury. It was the difference between financial imprisonment and freedom. 3. Invest in sovereign independent assets, 30-40% of portfolio. Allocate significant wealth to assets that maintain value regardless of any single government's debt crisis. Physical gold, income-producing international real estate, dividend-paying, multinationals with global operations, and Bitcoin. Why this works? Sovereign debt crises destroy government-linked assets. Domestic government bonds default or devalue. Domestic currency loses purchasing power. Domestic banks fail or get bailed in. And domestic stocks collapse as the economy implodes. But assets with value independent of government policy maintain purchasing power. Gold doesn't care if Egypt or Argentina or Greece defaults. It has no counterparty risk, no issuer that can default. International real estate in stable countries, Preserves wealth. Argentine investors who bought Miami condos in the 1990s preserved wealth through 9 Argentine defaults. Multinationals like Nestlé, Unilever, or Johnson & Johnson earn revenue in 100-plus countries and pay dividends in hard currencies. When your local currency collapses, these shares denominated in Swiss francs or dollars preserve purchasing power. Bitcoin's value isn't tied to any single government's fiscal policy. Though it's volatile, it's uncorrelated with sovereign debt risk. How to implement? Allocate 15 to 20% of investable assets to physical gold and silver, actual coins or bars stored outside the banking system. See Action Step 1. Purchase gold in 1-ounce coins, American Eagles, Canadian Maple Leafs, Krugerrands, through reputable dealers, APMEX, JM Bullion. Avoid paper gold, ETFs, certificates that carry counterparty risk. Allocate 10-15% to international real estate, either direct purchase of rental property in stable countries, Portugal, Panama, Uruguay, Poland, emerging markets with improving governance, or REITs, real estate investment trusts, holding international property. Allocate 10-15% to dividend-paying multinationals domiciled in fiscally stable countries, Swiss companies, Nestlé, Novartis, Roche, Scandinavian companies, Novo Nordisk, Ericsson, or Asian companies, Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung. Choose. Companies with 50% plus international revenue, 25 plus years of dividend payments, and operations across all continents. Finally, allocate 5-10% to Bitcoin, only if you understand the technology and risk. It's volatile, but provides government-independent wealth storage that can cross borders instantly without government permission, making it valuable insurance against capital controls. Example: in Venezuela's 2016-2019 hyperinflation, Carlos Mendez, a Caracas engineer, had invested 30% of his savings in a small rental property in Panama City, purchased in 2012, and 20% in Swiss and American dividend-paying stocks through an international brokerage. When Venezuela's Bolivar lost 99.9% of its value, 100,000 bolivars went from buying a house in 2016 to buying a kilogram of cheese in 2019. His Venezuelan real estate, bank accounts, and bolivar-denominated assets became worthless. But his Panama rental generated $850 monthly in rent, deposited to his Panamanian bank account. His dividend stocks paid $320 quarterly in dollars and francs, deposited to his international brokerage, and he owned 15 ounces of gold stored at home. These sovereign independent assets generated $10,700 annually in hard currency, more than the average Venezuelan earned in years of bolivars by 2019. He eventually emigrated to Panama, using his rental property as his initial home, bringing his gold, and reconstructed his life. His diversification across sovereigns didn't just preserve wealth, it provided the physical means of escape and rebuilding, the psychological barrier preventing action, normalcy bias combined with inconvenience. These steps require effort, paperwork, research, moving money, thinking about uncomfortable scenarios. It's easier to believe my country won't collapse and do nothing. That's what Egyptians believed in 1875, Argentines believed in 2000, Greeks believed in 2009, Sri Lankans believed in 2019. The debt mathematics don't care about your optimism. If debt grows faster than GDP and interest compounds faster than economic growth, collapse is mathematical certainty. The only unknown is timing. You now possess the historical blueprint showing how debt traps destroy nations and the specific strategies that protected individuals through every crisis. The financial elite, those who survived Argentina's 9 defaults, Venezuela's hyperinflation, Lebanon's banking collapse, already follow these principles. They hold multiple passports, maintain offshore accounts, own international assets, and stay debt-free. The difference between you and them isn't access. These strategies are available to middle-class individuals earning 50,000 plows annually. It's knowledge and willingness to act before crisis makes action impossible. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Subscribe now, because next week, I'm revealing how central banks coordinate these debt traps to benefit the financial system at citizens' expense, the specific meetings, policies, and institutions that make sovereign debt a feature of the global system, not a bug. You need to see who actually benefits.